Have you ever heard something at night that you just knew wasn't human? Something that sounded almost right but just a little off? If you ever hear your name being called in the dead of night, don't answer, because it might not be a person calling you. It might be kasi something else. Lam. It started with a hunting trip. Josh, his brother Caleb, and their two friends, Mike and Dylan, had been planning this trip for months. A weekend in the dense woods of New Mexico, far from the distractions of city life. Just them, their rifles, and the open wilderness. The first day had gone well. They'd set up camp in a clearing, roasted marshmallows over a fire, and swapped stories. As the night deepened, the sounds of the forest surrounded them. The chirping of crickets, the occasional hoot of an owl, and the distant rustling of animals in the brush. But sometime after midnight, something changed. A long, piercing howl shattered the night. It wasn't a wolf, it wasn't a coyote, it was something in between, a sound that echoed unnaturally through the trees. Caleb sat up, gripping his rifle. What the hell was that? Mike chuckled nervously. Probably just a wolf. Dylan shook his head. There aren't wolves in this area. Another howl, closer this time. Josh felt an icy shiver crawl down his spine. He'd grown up in these parts, and he had heard stories. Stories about creatures that could mimic voices, about things that walked on two legs but weren't quite human. And then it happened. Josh. The voice floated through the trees, eerily familiar, but it wasn't from anyone in their group. It was coming from the darkness beyond the fire's glow. Josh, help me. It was his mother's voice, but his mother was hundreds of miles away. Josh's blood ran cold. The voice was so perfect, so identical, yet hollow, like a recording played back slightly distorted. Mike grabbed his flashlight and aimed it toward the trees. Who's there? Silence. Then, a figure stepped into the edge of the firelight. It was tall, impossibly thin, and clothed in ragged animal hides. Its limbs were too long, its fingers stretching into claw-like points. And worst of all, its face was almost human. Almost. But its eyes were black voids, and its mouth was twisted into something resembling a grin. Help me, the thing whispered in Josh's mother's voice, though its lips didn't move. Dylan fired his rifle. The gunshot cracked through the night, sending birds scattering from the treetops. The figure didn't flinch. Instead, it dropped onto all fours in a jerky, unnatural motion and scuttled back into the trees. That's when the screaming started. From all around them, voices called out. Familiar voices. Dylan heard his father's voice begging for help. Mike heard his little sister crying. Caleb swore he heard his own voice calling from the woods, an exact copy of himself. We need to leave, Josh hissed, grabbing his pack. Now. They didn't bother packing up the tent. They just ran. The hunt begins. The deeper they went into the woods, the worse it got. The trees seemed to stretch taller, their branches forming a cage around them. The air grew thick with the scent of decay. Every so often, one of them would hear footsteps right behind them. But when they turned, nothing. Then, the laughter began. It was soft at first, almost playful, but soon it twisted into something guttural, animalistic, a chorus of voices, overlapping, shifting. Mike tripped, falling hard against the dirt. When Josh turned to help him, his stomach dropped. Mike was staring ahead, wide-eyed. Guys! Look! Standing just a few yards away, partially obscured by the trees, was him, another Mike. It was identical in every way, the same torn jeans, the same bloody scrape on the arm from where he had fallen earlier. But its face was wrong. The eyes were just a little too large, the mouth stretched just a little too wide. Fake Mike grinned. Why are you running? They fired their rifles. The creature screeched, its form convulsing before vanishing into the shadows. But as the echo of gunfire faded, more figures emerged from the trees. Dozens of them. Some looked like the boys, others like people they'd never seen before, twisted, stretched imitations of human beings. And they were closing in. "Go!" Caleb screamed. They ran like their lives depended on it, because they did. Branches tore at their skin, roots threatened to trip them. The laughter never stopped. No matter how fast they ran, the voices surrounded them. Closer, closer. Then, through the trees, Josh saw salvation. Their truck. They tore through the last stretch of forest, practically diving into the vehicle. Josh fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as something slammed into the side of the truck. A pale, clawed hand reached up to the window. A face peered in, grinning with too many teeth. The truck roared to life, and Josh slammed the gas pedal. They sped down the dirt road, leaving the figures standing motionless in the red glow of the taillights. As they reached the highway, the voices faded. They didn't stop driving until they reached the city. They never spoke of that night again. Not really. There was no explanation that would make sense. But they all knew one thing. Something out there in those woods had seen them, had learned them. A week later, Josh received a call from an unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. When he played it back, his own voice whispered, "Why are you running?" Skinwalkers. Legends say they can mimic voices, steal faces, and hunt in the dark. Have you ever heard something outside your window at night? Have you ever been in the woods and felt like you weren't alone? If you have a story, share it in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more terrifying stories, because some legends are real.